Hello, and welcome to Carnival Personnel Sideshow. I'm Jacques.
I'm Joe.
And I don't know how anybody even listens, let alone gets conned into coming into your basement, but we've done it again, Joe.
Yay.
So we've had a bunch of guests, but I gotta say, probably the only guest that we've had who has a legit Wikipedia page is our friend John. Do you do the Wikipedia page?
I might have known that at one point.
Okay,
but I didn't remember it until you just pointed that out, Jacques.
So that's our way of welcoming our friend John. So John, say hello to the good people.
Hello, all you good people.
Now say hello to the rest of the listeners.
Hello, rest of listeners.
So John and I have known each other, I think, since 2004 is when we first met. You had a layover at the LAX airport, and management and I came by to see you. I forget where you were flying to and from, but management is the wife.
Yep. I listen. I figured that out in earlier episodes that I've listened to.
Previous podcast guest, Sam, who was here for the DC Television Universe show that is one of your favorites.
I got the most laundry done that week. It was incredible. So I thank you for that.
So we have John on for a number of reasons, but I'm going to go over a couple things and jump in and tell me how off I am when I read down your bio, most of which I knew already, none of which has come from Wikipedia, which, by the way, maybe we'll update your Wikipedia page for you after this show.
Or during.
During. So our good friend John grew up in Chicago, son of a judge, and I believe your first your first job was doing magic for kid parties?
Actually, that was my second job, because before I worked as a magician, I did do magic for kids' parties, but before that, starting when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I helped my father sell stamps to collectors on weekends. That was my first job.
How do you sell stamps to collectors?
So there used to be a hobby of stamp collecting,
which is called
stamp collecting.
Stamp collecting.
I know there's a big word for
Actually,
it.
there's a big word,
Yeah.
philately or philatelist.
God bless you.
A philatelist, I believe, is a
I've been
stamp
asking my
collector.
wife for philatelist for some time now. And
So my dad, his weekend job, he had a side business of selling stamps to collectors. And so we'd buy stamps and we'd go to little shows around the Midwest and sell them. And I learned a lot of lessons doing that with my dad about how to deal with the public, deal with customers, treat customers well, do a lot of math, stuff like that. Skills that came in handy later.
Great, yes.
So, but my second real job was doing magic shows at kids' parties and restaurants, things like that.
And somehow, after spending all this time with kids and at parties, you decided to be a father later in life. That didn't scar you forever?
No, I always wanted to be a father. And then now with 6 kids and stepkids, it seems like a small group compared to some of the parties I used to work on.
And then you, correct me if I'm wrong, you applied to MIT and went out to do an MIT visit, and your father didn't even know. You just went by yourself from Chicago to Boston.
Sort of, not exactly true. I did go by myself. I'd never been on an airplane before, and I bought my own ticket, but my father knew I was going.
Okay.
My father and mother knew. It wasn't like I was sneaking out, but still, I was 16, and I went over to the travel agent and took money I'd earned, probably doing magic shows and selling stamps, and I came out to visit at MIT,
and so you were at MIT, and then after MIT, and this is I don't know how long after MIT my management came into your orbit, but John was when management started working with John, he had a 1-year-old son at the time. No other kids, and he was tinkering with a few friends in the garage. I guess you had a previous venture that didn't go exactly as you hoped, and this was your second venture. And that little tinkering with a few friends in your garage, which sounds like something out of every Silicon Valley story you hear, turned out to be SolidWorks.
That's right. Yeah, it wasn't in the garage exactly, but it was in the spare bedroom, in the living room, and my friends and co-founders' living rooms. Yeah, we started building this piece of software, and that's what became SolidWorks.
And so, in the first year that management was with you, you went from having a 1-year-old boy to a 2-year-old boy and a 1-year-old daughter. Anything else happened in that time frame in the first year, 18 months of management working with you?
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to grow SolidWorks and have, first off, a ton of interesting customers, which I always think of as the best part of what we did at SolidWorks. But we also had sold the company, and we were acquired by Dassault Systèmes of France, a much bigger software company.
And SolidWorks is what type of software?
Computer-aided design software.
CAD.
And so we won't tell everybody, because we won't embarrass you, how much you sold the company for. But let's just say
It's a lot.
and line from the jerk. Every time we can quote the jerk, we will. And so, but you sold the company, but you stayed on as president or CEO. What? But you stayed on as kind of the figurehead, or not the figurehead, the face of the company. And I remember management talking about how much travel and how much great travel that you guys got to do, going over to France. I think you guys went to London. I know when you would have different conferences and stuff like that. It was a very exciting time, I guess, for you.
It was an exciting time, and I stayed on as CEO of the SolidWorks business, which they kept running as a subsidiary kind of business, and we're fairly independent in our own business. And I was CEO for many years, and then I stayed with the company, but as more of the figurehead you're talking about. But that was many years later. So there was acquisition, a long period as CEO, and then another period where I was a group executive, which was the cushiest job on earth, I might add. And I did travel a ton.
Right.
And you said it's great travel. Well, it's great the first few times you go to Paris, but after you go every month for a year, and I was traveling so much, you just get tired of it. And that was one of the reasons I stepped down as CEO.
And you took a year. You left SolidWorks a few years back. You took a year to kind of figure out what you were going to do. I think you knew what you were going to do all along. I think an NDA said you couldn't figure out what you're going to do all along. And somehow out of that, you started the new venture, which I think you remember. I think you wanted to call it Foundry, but I don't know. Is Foundry the same thing that became Onshape?
Yeah, we had talked about a lot of names. You have a great memory, Foundry being one of them. But Onshape, so we started Onshape because we felt it was time to build, yet again, a new generation of computer-aided design of CAD and related tools for data management, collaboration, that the whole suite of tools for product development honestly had to be rebuilt if we were going to really take a leap forward for what we could do for our customers, who are some of the coolest product designers in the world. And so that's the story of Onshape, building another generation.
2.5 years in now. How
No,
long?
actually, let's say we're 6 years in, but that's from a standing start, in a conference room. And in some ways, our tool set was really only fully deployed last year.
Right.
So we started selling before then, but it was with a subset of all the capabilities we wanted to have. We still are adding tons of new features in different areas, but all the major modules are in place now, and that really only happened last year.
So this is all exciting. Some of our friends, Biff, who's a big tech guy, is probably I think you probably met him and knows all this, and we could talk CAD forever. But
I can talk CAD forever.
I can fake like I know what's going on, like nobody's business. So I could nod and say a few things here and there, but that is not why you're here.
I could talk any piece of the CAD world forever. I could talk data management and release management and revision control. I could talk collaboration and viewing tools and product development analytics. I could talk about any of those forever, but I'm not going to. But I want you to know I could. All right.
But we wanted you here. We're going to get into the background of the funding for SolidWorks. Where what I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, it's still a great story. Where some of the funding came from, and you're here not just to eat the chips and smile nicely at Joe.
Oh, I thought you meant I was going to be eating the chips and smiling nicely at John. That's what I'm doing right now.
Thank you. But here is why John does a lot of speaking things, and his claim to fame, aside from being a nice father and a good person and all that stuff, yada, yada, yada. John was part of the MIT 1980 card counting team, of the Blackjack Team, that has borne out documentaries such as Game Show Network's Anything to Win and the History Channel's documentary Breaking Vegas. And, also, most people know the movie 21, which, we'll get into. The main character in the movie 21, I guess, is a collection of the personalities from the team. But we'll get into it, and if I can find links, we'll post them. But Breaking Vegas was the documentary that I think I liked most of them.
Yeah, I liked it most too. And that's not just because I'm in it. Okay. I happen to be in it, but I like it. And interestingly, all the scenes that I'm in that documentary were shot at my office. They came out to my office. I just didn't really have time. I was so busy. And I'm like, well, if you come out here. And so they're like, yeah, we'll come out there. And they came out one day at the end of the day, and we sat in a conference room. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, it was a great adventure, And just to, when people say, oh, it was the Blackjack Team that I funded SolidWorks, that's not exactly accurate, because I had...
Thanks, Wikipedia.
Well, it's not completely wrong either. The way I would put it is, because I had made money playing blackjack, I was able to take the year off with no income to start SolidWorks, and modest amounts of spending on like a little bit of office space, a phone system. Back in those days, you bought a phone system. You couldn't really imagine this today, like a cabinet, and it was, it was expensive. And so I had some room. Blackjack gave me room to breathe financially, so that I could start the company. But it's not like I took blackjack money, and just put it into the treasury of the company. I didn't do that. It was a little bit different. It gave me the footing I needed to be able to spend time, because no one would invest in me back then. I got turned down everywhere. But anyway, back to blackjack. Yeah, it was an incredible adventure, and I played for years, and the stories that you see in all the places you mentioned are a combination of truth and fiction to some degree mixed together. The Breaking Vegas documentary has the highest ratio of truth to fiction, I would say.
So it looked like getting onto the team was an elaborate challenge, like not just any smart kid who came in and did it. And this is where it might be true, it might not. Like things like testing people under pressure, like dumping water on them as they're trying to count cards and stuff.
Which is now like a game show on Fox.
Is it really?
No, it's like the premise of like most
exactly.
of these modern game shows. Put the contestants under physical duress and then have them answer trivia questions.
No, we never dumped water on anyone. And what was the phrase you just used? You said it was really hard to make the team really tough.
Right. Was there a weeding out process?
Sort of, but it was more like attrition. It was more like people would drop out, because basically blackjack was a lot of work and a lot of study. And it's kind of like a class where, yes, you have to have a certain amount of skill with math, but the math is shockingly simple. I'll tell you some of the truths of blackjack. The math is not that complicated. You're not doing calculus in your head. You're doing things like, adding or subtracting one to a number. Most people can do that.
Slow down.
Yeah. If you can do things like 7, 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 6,
I know those
7,
numbers.
8, like that. If you can do that for 12 hours a day, and if you can do math like, 15 divided by 3 minus 1 times 200, And the thing is, it's even easier than that because you're doing a lot of the same problems over and over. You know, like they're not random problems. You're doing a lot of math with numbers like 10, 11, 12, 14, divided by numbers like 2.5, 3, 3.5. So you almost memorize some of them, and it's just not that hard. What is hard, and there's not a lot of memory either. You only need about as much memory as it would take to type without looking at the keys. So if you can type without looking at the keys on the keyboard, okay, some people are, but now the trick is you have to be able to do that stuff super reliably. Like you have to be able to not make mistakes. It's kind of a skill like typing. If I said you learn to type, you'd say I could learn to type. Now do it, 80 words a minute, 100 words a minute, whatever, some high speed. And you're like, well, maybe I could learn that. Now do it with no errors for hours at a time, and that's kind of and yes, we did do the testing with distractions, not water, but we would do things like this part of the documentary is pretty accurate. You're dealing in a classroom. You'd set up like a fake casino table and deal decks of cards. In the middle, you'd come over to the player, the person being tested, and you'd say stuff like, "Oh, can I get your name, sir, for writing?" Because people in the casino would do that. "Can I get your name? And what's your birth date?" You have to say your birthday, and then they'll say oh wait, did you say was that 3/26/59? And that's in the middle of you doing 15 divided by 3.
Right.
So you have to keep that stuff straightened out, or you're going to fail the test. And so the testing was pretty rigorous, but it really was a test of persistence and willing to practice as much as it was talent. It's not like we were looking for the 1 in a million math genius or something. It wasn't like that. It was more, like I say, like learning to type fast and working at it.
Was MIT on board with this?
I don't think MIT really knew, whatever MIT is. When you mean like the administration of MIT, I don't think they really knew much about it. It wasn't a famous thing.
So you didn't have like uniforms and like your names on the back of the
No, we didn't have uniforms.
Okay.
You know that. It was, we used to meet in a classroom at night, but that wasn't officially designated by MIT. It would just be we would go and sit in an empty classroom at night, always Thursday nights.
Now, the team was around. How long was the team around before you got to MIT?
So the team that I know, and everything I'm going to tell you about blackjack is should end with as far as I know, because there's always things I don't know. When people say something absolute about it, I've learned enough to know there's a lot of things going on that other people don't necessarily want to talk about. So anyway, the team as I know it, as far as I know, the team I was on sort of started, the origins go back to the late 70s, okay, with these guys. I don't know if I should mention, it's always hard for me to remember who in the blackjack community is public about their involvement and who keeps their role quiet and doesn't want their name out there. But, let's say there was Mr. X and Mr. Y. There's who got the team started around the time that Resorts International opened the first casino in Atlantic City. And they started. So late 70s, and I came along in, not that I remember, but January of 84. That's when I saw a sign at the Student Center, a paper sign. I could tell you this whole story if you want.
Yes, please do.
I'll warn you that people ask me sometimes, like, is it hard to get you to talk about blackjack? And I say, no, it's hard to get me to stop talking about blackjack. Okay, so there's a little joke. But anyway, I was walking through the MIT Student Center. I saw a paper sign up, hanging there in the bulletin board or something. It said, earn $2,000 to $6,000 over the next 6 months playing blackjack with a professional team. And if you're interested, come to room 2- everything at MIT is numbers, 2-1, I forget the exact number, but like 2-144, Thursday night, 7 p.m. And I thought I was a magician. I thought I understood a lot about cards. And I'm like, this probably can't work. It's probably some kind of scam. But, that card trick part of my mind was interested. And my dad had a background, in gambling, not professionally exactly, but he was an enthusiastic and good handicapper of horses, and I understand was a great poker player. Although I never.
So was
played
Tanya
with him.
Harding.
Oh,
great handicapper. capper of horses.
I will not cut that joke out.
That's anyway. So anyway, there was some of that in my background. I thought this looks really interesting. I'll go, and I went to that meeting, very skeptical, and that's what began my career as a blackjack player.
And you stayed through your. Was this your freshman year at MIT?
Oh gosh, no! I couldn't have done it as a hardworking undergraduate with a full course load. This was coincidental. You know, sometimes life things happen. I was a grad student.
Okay.
Which is generally a more relaxed life than an undergrad. And then January of '84 is also when my advisor started a year's sabbatical in Japan. He went to Japan, my advisor, and the lab where I worked, the floor of the building at MIT that I worked on started a major renovation, and we were located to a different area, and our computer had been dismantled. You know, I say our computer. This was before you had a computer in your backpack. You know, there was a computer lab. And so basically it meant that there wasn't a lot to do around the lab. So this is fortunate timing for me. You know, and I did take, I was taking like 1 or 2 classes as a grad student, but it was at a lull in my student life there. I couldn't have done it as an undergraduate.
And did it become a real job?
It became a real side gig job. I'd call it by today's language, I think. That's what you younger folks call it, right? A side gig.
Right.
And so, a second job, but a pretty intense one. So most weekends, I would go probably every other weekend or so. Sometimes I'd go 5 or 6 weeks in a row. It was usually on weekends. And practice almost every day. And Thursday nights were our weekly meetings. Yeah.
And you go to Atlantic City or Vegas or both?
So a lot more to Atlantic City. The story is about Vegas. People are like, oh, the team went to Vegas, but Atlantic City was closer and we were really cheap. So even though we were betting all this money and winning a lot of money, we were basically cheap people. And so we would drive to Atlantic City.
And the money that you win in Atlantic City is just as good as
yes,
the money
it
as you win in
turns
Vegas?
out,
same money, really.
It turns out the money is the same. Yeah,
Wow.
very good point.
Okay.
And so we did go to Vegas at times, and there were always different reasons you would go to different places. But I probably went to Atlantic City 3 or 4 times for every time I went to Vegas.
I want to get back into the breaking Vegas and what was real and what was not. So there was a big scene in that where they had a kid playing like 3 games simultaneously, playing 3 different hands simultaneously, and they dumped the water on his head, and just to test him under pressure. Some of the other stuff, and I think I know the answers, but All-Star Tommy doesn't, so I'll ask. Were you in Las Vegas and rounded up by security and taken to a part of the building where there aren't cameras?
I was never taken to a part of the building where there weren't cameras.
Okay.
I was rounded up by security a couple of times, not that often, but no dark, violent places.
Like you thought, like
Just
I'm
like,
not
here's the
coming
door, son.
No, it was more like, well, there were different levels of getting what we call getting barred. It means getting kicked out, basically, getting barred. And so you get like soft barred or hard barred. And so there's a range. Like soft barring would be like, hey, look, Mr. H, that's what they might call me there, Mr. H, just really don't want to book your action anymore at the blackjack table. You're welcome to play other games or whatever, or have dinner on us. Like they could be really nice about it. And then at the other extreme, the hard barring is like the security guard says, come with us. And you go to the back room and they like read you this card, this little card, like kind of like a Miranda card. They're like, under Nevada statute such and so, you're being barred from the premises of, Caesar's Palace, Caesar's World. Should you enter onto the premises again, you will be arrested for trespassing. Do you understand? But they don't do anything else. They're just security
But you
guards.
didn't think you were going to get roughed up.
No, but it's nerve-wracking. It's kind of like, if you get stopped by the police for speeding, or
we're white. It's fine.
Yeah, or if you try to sneak, when you were younger, you try and sneak in somewhere with a fake ID or something. It's that kind of a feeling. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna,
My life is ruined.
yeah, like people are like, well, isn't it a violent place? I saw this on TV. It's kind of like thinking about being in a tavern. You go to a bar. I mean, this on TV. Guys come up to you, tap you on the shoulder and hit you over the head with a beer bottle and stuff. But that's never happened to me in a bar. I mean, Jacques maybe.
We went to different bars.
Yeah, but
Happened to and happened to others.
Yeah. With Jacques, it probably hasn't happened within the last week anyway. But
not that I remember.
So look, so no, that never happened. The violence in the movie never happened to me or anyone I knew directly. The betrayal never happened. I'm getting into some of the fictional parts. I mean, people getting drunk and playing. No, that never happened. We just wouldn't do that.
And do you think, did you guys go in teams and work together at the tables, or were you all individuals? How and what was the line that they thought you crossed? And it's a line simply, you're not supposed to win?
No, so let me take those in order. Okay, so the answer is we could play either way, either individually or as a group, usually as a group. And there were reasons to do that. It depends on the conditions. First of all, it depends if you have other teammates with you. If you're there alone, then you play alone. And any of us could play, or most of us could play alone. But the reasons to play with teammates are you can have more efficiency and you can cover your play a little better. Mm-hmm. You can look a little less like you're a card counter by signaling other people in, which is in the movie. Pretty reasonably accurate there. Right. We're in the casino, the three of us. I see a good count. Instead of me standing behind the table and jumping in, I call you over, and you're like presumably new to the situation, and you sit down. A little better that way. And then you asked the second question after that was, you asked about did we work as a team, and then you asked another question. What was it?
I'm trying to think of what it was, but one of the things I was thinking, did you have quotas? Like when you got sent out, did you get, here's $10,000, dollars?
No.
You
asked back? How we got, what was the trigger?
What was the trigger
for
them to kick
Basically, once they figure out you're using a card counting system or any sort of system like that, but card counting was the only one they really knew about. I'll get to other systems if you want to talk about really interesting stuff, things you can't read about in books and TV shows and movies. But the card counting system, once they figure out you're card counting and you're good at it, they don't want you there, whether winning or losing. Winning, ironically, is seldom the reason they know you're what we call, these days is called an advantage player. Because regular players win all the time, and card counters lose all the time. And so winning streak doesn't necessarily mean that you're a skilled player. Now, at times, it could get a little ridiculous, and it would signal you. So they might say, hey, look, you've been here 14 times in the last 2 years, and you've won 13 of them. We don't know what you're doing, but we don't want any more of this. So that happened to one of my associates, actually. But usually it was more about them being drawn to your play because of a suspicious pattern of activity. So if I count cards and you know how to count cards and you watch me play, you'll know if I'm counting cards. You can observe someone else doing it, and they don't want people who are good at it to do it. They don't mind if you think you're counting cards and you're not so good at it, then they welcome you in. Actually, card counting, as I understand it, card counting was the best thing to ever happen for the casinos.
Right, I've heard that.
Yeah,
because everybody thought they could do it.
Yeah, if you're good enough, you can win. You tell that to a player, and oh my gosh, people are like, well, I'm pretty good. No, most people aren't pretty good enough to win. I can as far as I know, I can tell you that through observation. So basically, it's detecting that you play well, regardless of win and loss. That will kick you out. Also, recognition if they find out that if they find you, it used to be a picture in like a book or a name. They run your name through the computer, and you've been kicked out somewhere else. That's a big problem.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm jumping a little ahead. I had a couple more questions, but I don't want to forget this one.
Go.
So, John, you're a larger person. You can't blend in.
Yes.
And you've been barred from some places. I believe there's a couple people that you're friends with who to this day are barred at places, but they are very can blend in a lot easier.
Yes, different physical makeups can blend in a little more easily. You're right. I'm a pretty large person and I stand out. I also didn't have options like dressing as a woman. Is probably not my...
In my head,
Yeah.
I'm like, he
Yeah.
has an Asian friend
Yeah.
who dresses in drag and goes into casinos that they've been
Yeah.
barred from. And in my head, I'm like, okay,
Anything to win.
Anything. Oh yeah, that wouldn't even bat an eye with the people I played with. Yeah, he dressed up as a woman, fake mustache, colored hair, all kinds of things to play. Yeah, the dress up as a
so if
woman.
you're going
part
as
was-
Mario, Joe.
Yeah, you try to change your appearance. I would just do things like change my clothing and style of clothing.
But you're still 6'5", 6'4"?
6'4".
Yeah,
Yeah, it
it's
was
kinda hard
6'4", 200
And a very unattractive woman. I will say it right
Well,
now. Very
now be
unattractive.
careful now because these days we don't want to make judgments about stereotypical appearances. All I'll say is disguise was not a particularly strong option for me, as it might be for people. Also, some people just can cover a larger range of ages.
Right.
Like I have a friend of mine who I swear back in the day, he was probably in his mid-late 20s, and he could look 20, he could look 40. It just depended on how he dressed up and whether, sprinkle a little gray in the hair. He was a very convincing 40-year-old businessman. And one time, one of the employees of the casino, I was having dinner. It's something you did sometimes. They'd invite you to dinner. I didn't like to do that because it cut into my playing time, but once in a while you do it. And so this host in the casino was having dinner, and he tells me, oh, I've got this other customer, and he gives me his fake name. I won't say, he's this billionaire's nephew. That was his kind of cover story. And he says, and he names the person. And he says, yeah, he calls me from Paris and says, I'm flying in on the Concorde. And I know this is my friend, okay, who he doesn't know we know each other. I'm just laughing because my friend is actually flying in on People's Express, in steerage class, the cheapest
Which
possible
was
way.
the Concorde of...
No,
I think they were a defunct sponsor of our podcast, People's Express.
You are right. They are.
Yeah.
What?
Well, on our regular podcast, when we do breaks, we do something called the defunct sponsor of the week, where we play a commercial from a
Company that does
a
it.
company that is defunct, and we
People's
did do a
Express.
People's Express.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. So, anyway, back to your questions. What?
Yeah, no. So I remember you saying that because you. There's a couple I wanted to get in here. Now, was there a quota like you guys are sent out with X amount of money, and the expectation is you come back with more than you took? And how did you? Okay, if the club gave you $10,000 to go out with, were you expected to pay that back and then keep a percentage above it? How did
this
winning
whole
work?
thing work? Okay, I'll try and give you short as quickly as I can. So we would form a project called a bank, a pool of money and a time period that we would generally be trying to double it. And the size of the banks I was involved in ranged from 100,000 to maybe $750,000. You would start with. And I'm going to simplify a little bit here just for purposes of, and you'd say, let's try over 6 months to double that money. You'd take as much money as you felt. It was like ammo, you take as much as you felt you needed for the place you were going, the types of limits you would encounter and so forth. And you would go into the casino. You did not have a quota. You did not keep a share of the winnings right away. What you would do is you would play and try to generate what we called EV, expected value. Basically, place bets that had favorable advantage to the team. So I might place a bet. I might bet $1,000 with a 1% edge. Okay, that's $10 in expected value to the team. Now, I might win or lose $1,000. It's the same $10. I get $10 in EV on my sheet. We would write down our play on a sheet. I still have some of those sheets, which was really cool. You kept that in your pocket. And that was part of learning to play, was remembering what you did. You had to write this stuff down. So if the three of us went into the casino for an hour or two, we would each remember what we did. And when we got out, we'd write it down. And then later, when we got back to Boston, we'd add up the credit. So you'd earn credit for those plays. You might win or lose $20,000, but you might generate, $1,270 in expected value, and that was your credit. Because we really didn't, the one thing that didn't matter to what you got paid was how much you won or lost, ironically. That's kind of hard for you to understand.
It's hard, yeah.
Yeah. But think about if you ran a casino, okay? If you ran a casino, you would probably incent people to get a lot of players in the door. You wouldn't say, oh, that player you brought in lost money and the guy you brought in won. You'd say, look, for every player you get in the door, I'll pay you, because on average, if you're the casino, on average, the players are going to lose. If you're us, on average, we're going to win. And we would audit your play. We would check you out, test you to be sure your play was advantageous to a very high level of confidence. And so we would score people on essentially the amount of good play that they did. And then at the end of the 6 months, let's say, and again, I'm simplifying a little, we would say, okay, we actually won. Say we doubled the bank. We started with $300,000 and we ended with $600,000. We have $300,000 in profit. Half of that, $150,000, would get distributed to the players based on how much credit, EV credit they got. This may be a little more detail than you want, kind of like how many points you had earned. Mm-hmm. And then the other half would be distributed to the investors based on what share they invested in the original money.
And who were the investors to get this bankroll?
So at the beginning, the investors were all people I didn't know, friends of the organizers of the team. I certainly didn't invest. By the time, very quickly into it, the investors were only the players, because the players had enough money to invest. And so it was the same group of people. It was just a different allocation based on how much you invested.
So you could be an investor and then earn points on that, and then also your EV, you'd earn points on that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And different people would invest and play in different relative amounts depending on who you were and what your circumstances and time were and so forth.
Well, so if somebody makes a team, how do they stay on the team, or how much leash do you give them? It's like, dude, you've gone there 5 times and you've come back a loser 4 out of the 5 times, or what was there? Or once you were on, you were on.
I think that I really remember it being largely a self-selective process, a mutual process when people would leave the team. We never really told anyone they were off the team that I can remember. It's possible we did for egregious things. But it was more like you had to earn your license to play. So you could be on the team, but you're not going to make any real money until you've been what we call checked out, the test, until you could pass the test. And checking out, by the way, was a very cool process, because after you'd play 50 decks in the classroom, I'm going to go on a little tangent here.
We don't allow tangents on this podcast.
I know Jacques has total attention lock at all times. But anyway, I'm going to go on a little tangent and talk about the checkout, because I think you'll find it interesting. So you play 50 decks nearly perfectly in the classroom with all these distractions like, oh, can I get your name for a rating? Or is that 4 people? It's 7 o'clock for dinner, and trying to confuse you, and stuff. And you do all that stuff perfectly. Okay, playing with betting the chips, playing multiple hands in the classroom. And that meant you were ready to go to the casino and be handed $100 to, as we'd say, flat bet $5, which is like the lowest, level of, it's like.
It's your driver's permit.
Yeah, that's like you can go back and forth in the parking lot when no cars are around. This would be like passing a high speed emergency racing maneuvers course on a practice track, and then you go to the real place and they're like, okay, only in the parking lot in daylight when no one's around. It's so you feel so qualified, but then we would start again, and then you'd have to be watched in the casino by somebody more experienced, and you actually had to pay for those watching hours. As a new player, you would be debited. Now, you didn't have to pay out of your pocket, but later on you paid back with credit you earned, because the senior players would have to take time to watch you. And so it was such a rigorous testing program that by the time you kind of earned so that was really what it was about. We wouldn't really kick you out if you kept coming. And I can remember some people would take incredibly long periods to kind of earn their license, and other people did it really fast. We had this one guy, I still remember this guy, who was like a PhD candidate at MIT in physics, and he was just really good at the technical part of counting, and he passed the test very quickly. Now, he wasn't the top money earner, though. We'll get to that in a minute about why that is. And then there was another person who just kept trying for like, I'm going to say 2 years, and just kept plugging away. And we didn't, and then people would leave the team. It's a grind. It's not real life. It's like people would eventually leave. So I can't recall a time where somebody was losing so much that we said, you're off the team. We might have said, what's going on? Let's check the guy out. Or we are always worried about fraud. The biggest problem you have is it's a cash business, and someone could come back and say, I lost 10 grand, and they actually put 10 grand in their pocket.
I was going to ask you if there was any sort of there's always that lingering doubt. Is there temptation to shave your winnings off of what you're reporting?
Yeah. So I think in a lot of groups that are very, trust based, it's sort of like asking, is one of the soldiers in your army unit working for the other side, or going to shoot you in the back, and it's not that serious. I shouldn't say that, actually. It's not life or death. But, it's like it was one of your business partners going to take money. All I'd say is we went through such intense experiences together in the training and the getting ready and the constant watching. And you just got a feeling of confidence that the people around you were the real deal.
Tune in next week for part 2 of Carnival Personnel's Sideshow, Blackjack.